Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Today, I'm going to be going over race as a category and how I do not believe that it's not only it's an inaccurate categorization of people, but it's also one that is divisive and does nothing but create destruction everywhere it goes. The first thing we have to understand is race is a creation of the mind and it lacks any basis in science. So there's not an observable characteristic that you can say is attributed to any specific characteristic. So if I were to say you have this particular skin color, etc. So I guess the first thing we really have to do is define it. And there's a couple ways that this is done. This is done through the government has its own definition of race, which is more or less a category of people in which you can place them in based on particular characteristics. And what it does is it combines many aspects. So when it comes to ethnicity, because race is part of ethnicity. So ethnicity has 6 categories. It has culture, it has religion, language, region, nationality, and race. So again, that's culture, region, nationality, religion, language, and race. So these 6 categories, I might have gotten one mixed up, but these 6 categories are that is what ethnicity covers. Now each one of these are mutually exclusive, meaning that I can be of a particular racial phenotypical expression and I can have any of these other ones separately. So I can be of a particular culture, I can have a particular language, and my nationality can vary. I can for example, I can speak Spanish, live in Germany, have the be Islam or Islam, be Muslim. What else is there? Language, religion, and I could be from another region. So I can be from like India. So all these things are mutually exclusive. Now, they do congregate together typically, and that makes sense because if you're from a particular region, you're likely going to have the language there, the culture there, the religion there, all the different aspects that are not immutable. So what happens is throughout our history, our evolutionary history, people have had specific groups in which they've, more or less created a lot of characteristics that are the same in that group when it comes to phenotypical expression, like skin color, eye shape, etc., hair color, hair shape. But it doesn't mean that they've changed anything about them in terms of their ability to operate in a stable society based on the principles of reciprocal cooperation, because all of us have those things instilled in us. So basically what I'm saying is these 6 categories are mutually exclusive from race. So what you can say is either race is mutually exclusive from them or it's integrated in them. So those are the 2 arguments. There's no other way to say it. And if you think that race is the basis for whether or not you have a particular culture or you have a particular religion or any of these other characteristics, then that makes you racist. So that's what people are doing. They're saying if you're African American, you have all these specific traits, like you're more poor or you aren't as smart, like on both sides, right? So on the left, it's these people are more poor on average, so we need to take care of them, and they have these characteristics of being poor based on our data. Well, your data is inaccurate because you're going after the wrong thing. You're not addressing the root of the problem, which is to say individual economic strife is the problem that we're tackling. But we already have solutions in place, and we do not need like a top-down implementation of socialism or anything else to bring these people up. We need them to understand that reciprocal cooperation is what we need, not necessarily racial categories and then other people helping you in these ways. So obviously, when you have a more personal aspect and you're helping people to get them out of the situation they're in, it's different than when we are scrutinizing based on these categories that are not even accurate of reality. So the category should more or less be redefined. So the way I see it, race it can stay phenotypical expression, but the use case I would say, is for the means of identification. So we identify these individuals based on their race or their phenotypical expressions. We do not make any other assumptions about who they are as an individual. Next, if you want to rectify things such as inequality, what else is there? When those individuals are being ostracized or discriminated against, that happens at an individual level. No individual experiences the same discrimination, the same amount of discrimination, or any of these other experiences. So that's very specific to that person. So you have to find out their specific situation in the court of law and attribute it to those individuals and to that situation. You cannot make a blanket statement and say this individual experienced this, therefore all individuals that have these guys' characteristics experience this. It's the same with slavery. It's the same with all these things. None of these things were ubiquitous, unanimous, well understood to the degree of the individual what their experience was. And we can't do that. So what is the way you can identify an individual who's experienced discrimination? Well, we do that through the court of law. We do that through interpreting those individual circumstances and events. And that's how we do it. And these individuals need to bring up their individual situation up to the court of law or through the right process. Now, do we possibly need to change the process to where it's easier and not as expensive for these individuals to ensure that they can go through the proper channels to rectify their discrimination or their issue? Yes. But at the same time, we shouldn't make it so easy so as everyone can do it, because you're going to have people who are taking advantage of this situation. So this is a very complicated way to say that we need to rectify these things, but don't oversimplify it to where it's a free-for-all. So the better category is lineage. So what is somebody's lineage? After you've had the individual understanding, like what they've experienced individually, when it comes to identifying people who have been the result of slavery, you cannot categorize them as race, because if people come from Africa currently, they've never been a slave, their ancestors never been a slave, especially in America, and why would they get reparations or any other thing that these other individuals who are also African American, or we would consider to be of that type, why would they get the same treatment or the same things? So regardless of what our answer is with that, I think we would all agree that it's obvious that this other category of person is different somehow. And how do we know that? Well, they haven't had these experiences. Their ancestors haven't had these experiences, so they wouldn't deserve the differential treatment that we're imposing on these other individuals. So it cannot be race that is the category we're seeking to rectify. And that's why I say lineages. So it's either your individual's discrimination or your family's discrimination that they were, or slavery, or whatever the specific thing that you're trying to target is based on either lineage or you as an individual. So obviously there's a lot of answers to rectify it. All I'm arguing for are the categories here. So lineage is a better category for those who are seeking to have their either individual discrimination rectified or past discrimination of their ancestors. So next, so the category of race itself is like I was saying, phenotypical expression. And the entire history of race is completely encumbered by all the terrible outcomes it's created and manifested. So from its inception, its entire purpose was to divide people for the sake of either dehumanizing them or utilizing it for a class war or some kind of barrier, ostracization, segregation, all these other things that happened in the past and seem to be happening again, with places like my college having a black-only area, which is crazy to me. Like, your self-segregation, or it's just segregation again. It's like you're saying that these other people are so different that they can't be with you and celebrate your culture, etc. It's like the same arguments that were being made on the other side are now being made on this side. But race has historically been employed to foster hatred and division, and there's nothing about it that has irreplaceable utility. Everything I just mentioned can be replaced by either lineage or identification purposes, is what we would say race is for. Other than that, it should not be used for categorization or understanding which needs we need to have met, or anything else. And this would obviously, it doesn't throw a wrench in anything, because imagine you have statistics where you're categorizing people like this based on their murders, deaths, etc. Well, what are you really looking at is individuals who are doing these things, and each individual case is its own separate thing that needs to be addressed. Now, what do you do with statistics when somebody's murdering? Well, you look at how many murders there are, the region it's in, like what does the race of these individuals have to do with how you're going to treat this situation? It has nothing to do with it. Like somebody being blue-eyed is going to have nothing to do with how we treat whether or not they murdered someone. And the statistics are region-based, so it has nothing to do with anything these individuals biologically or phenotypically are expressing. So in the end, it's about these individuals, what they're doing, and we could still take statistics on it, but it's region based. So how many murders, where are they happening, where do these people seem to be from, which you can just paint two different colors, like blue for where they're actually living, green for where the incidents are happening, and then you can draw a heat map or whatever else. But that would lead to much better conclusions and much better answers than it's here's the racial statistics, like, because that all that does is divide people. When they see the outcomes, it's like, well, look at all these black people who are murdering each other at this disproportionate rate. Like, what is the reason for it? I do not believe it has a biological basis, and all you do is fuel that fire for people to say there is a biological basis if it cannot be rectified. And really, these people just need a change of heart, a change of mind to see that love and reciprocity and cooperation are the answer. And that's what they need to aim for, instead of constantly trying to play power games. So that's what they're playing right now. They're playing power. They're doing power, control, manipulation, and they're all for it. And these individuals can change their state of mind and can change this hedonistic desire for materialism, sex, drugs, violence, all these basic perceptions of how the world works. Because nobody in America is starving. Everyone has their basic needs met, and it doesn't seem that meeting these individuals' basic needs is doing anything to rectify their violence. They need a substantial change of how they perceive the world, and how cooperation and love is going to make them not only feel more fulfilled as individuals, but also bring them and all the things that they desire to them. So they need to sacrifice the fact that they're seeking those things in order to get them. But that's more philosophical than anything. My arguments here are purely on the basis of race being a miscategorization of people, both scientifically, psychologically, philosophically, and every other way that we can use it, because it's a pure rationalization. And what I mean by that is, if you're using it for the purposes of pure science to understand the differences between people, you're going to be 99.9% wrong, or something along those lines. Let's just say 99% wrong. So in 1.1 or 1% cases, you are correct in your assumptions. But at the same time, it's not even the case, because you have to factor in all the other genetic factors when it comes to that 1% difference. So when you're talking about a 1% difference between races, it's like, what differences are you talking about? Well, there's phenotypical, because there's not just phenotypical expression of your psyche or the way you perceive the world. A lot of it's physical. So a lot of those differences are physical. So what percent of those physical differences result in a psychological difference? I don't think very many. And then what you'd ask is, what's the remainder of that percentage that would result in people having a mental or psychological difference between them? And I think it's basically negligible, if anything. And yeah, it would be negligible, and it makes no sense. So a lot of this part goes into how Francis Bernier made these categories for the reason to segregate people based on these physical characteristics. Nobody did this before him, and people argue that it goes back to like the 13th century and 14th century, where people were basically saying that they were better than people of a particular region. And I forgot who the name of the individual, but I think he had like a Spanish name. But regardless, those things were region based. So they were saying people from this region are lesser than us. That's different. People, and again, that you can say that's regencist or whatever, like other terminology, but it's not racist. Racist is a specific thing where you're categorizing people based on physical characteristics and applying particular other traits to them, such as culture and the other 5 ethnicity categories. And if you want to just look up the on Wiki, look up ethnicity, and it'll define these 6 categories for you so you can understand them better. And then I'm not just speaking out of my ass here. But the point is that race is not an accurate category, and we can move past it, and we can make better, more accurate categories that will actually define what we're trying to get at. So when it comes to poverty, that's a very specific thing, and we do not need to categorize people based on their skin color or even lineage or anything of the sort to create either a class divide or a racial divide there. What we can do instead is just say these individuals have a lower social status and they can get out of it. They just need, it's possible they need like a little bit of a push in the right direction, and who knows what social programs we should implement based on that. But it very well could be that it's just that. But we do need to categorize these people based on what it is we're targeting, which is them being poor or having a low socioeconomic status. And that's what we should target rather than targeting race and saying that they are the outliers in this category and that that's the reason we should only help this group or help this group more. When in reality, if you're just helping everyone who's of this group of being poor or low socioeconomic status, you're inadvertently automatically going to help them more. So it doesn't matter. In the end, you're doing the same thing, but you're no longer using race as the category, which is a miscategorization and a categorization error. So it makes no sense to use this category. It's redundant and it's harmful. And it perpetuates a lot of the stereotypes. So if these individuals are having, if they think that they need to be a certain way because everyone else in their group is this way and this is how we divide people, then what is the reason for them not to interpret the world that way? Like, why would I not associate the color of my skin with a particular way of being if that's the way it's manifesting in reality and everybody else seems to agree with it? Well, if we just got rid of the category of race, then everyone stops categorizing people this way and viewing them as if race is the most significant feature that we should be paying attention to rather than culture, which is, I think, a much more accurate way of depicting whether or not somebody is engaging in something that is sustainable for a long-term stable society. So we can eventually get past this. And obviously, I think the first step is to ban the use of race as a category for individuals in the rule of law. Now, race as defined as a way of describing individuals based on anything other than phenotypical expression. So if your definition of race is that of phenotypical expression, so like black hair, blue eyes, all these other physical characteristics that you have, that is okay for the sake of identification purposes. But for every other purpose, it's wrong. And then on top of that, identifying people based on things such as black, white, as a identification of culture, ethnicity, etc., is just wrong, because ethnicity would mean that you're applying the color of their skin or these other features to that culture, which is inaccurate. So I've already went over rectifying past injustices, cultural and social recognition, how it would be enforced in policy. The data and research indicates that it's not only not an accurate categorization, but there's replacements for all of these categories categories. So it doesn't even make sense to maintain them if they're A, not accurate, B, not useful, and C, can be replaced with way better ones that are accurate. So again, I've argued that race should be replaced with, when it comes to the purposes of rectifying discrimination and past injustices, with lineage or your own personal anecdotal experience. So it's okay to say that you've experienced discrimination. Not everyone that shares these other characteristics with you shared your discrimination, unless they're in the group. Like, let's say you're all in the same business and all of you experienced the same discrimination at the same time, which is weird, because obviously it's not the same. Like, let's say there's a group of racists in your business, and they pick on all the people of this other race, and one group, or that group, decides to take one person into a bathroom and beat him up, and they don't do this with anyone else in that group. Have all the other individuals that are of the same group, I mean, obviously they're going to experience fear now, but have they experienced the same thing that individual has? No. This is why we make these distinctions. So yes, and then obviously the solution is for obviously the business to rectify what happened to that individual, but also the law to take those individuals who are being racist in and find out whether or not the company had some involvement in the way they were acting, and either encouraging that or allowing it. So obviously that needs to all be done, but at the same time, like, the category of race is not useful anywhere in there in any other part than understanding that these individuals are using race as a category in order to as a evidence or a reason to do the things that they did to this individual. So that's the aspect of using race for individual and past discrimination. It's wrong. We should use lineage and personal anecdotal experience. And then on the other end, when it comes to identification or classification of groups for the sake of rectifying social injustices, let's say, then it needs to be of mutable characteristics rather than immutable ones. So when it comes to whether or not you are of a low socioeconomic status, this is not an immutable characteristic. You can get richer, you can accrue more assets, you can gain things in your life if you put forth the effort and try to better yourself. Now, should we categorize race on top of that mutable characteristic with an immutable characteristic? So should we say having a low socioeconomic status and being black means that you need more help than other people because a disproportionate amount of your skin color, or even race as a whole, because obviously you don't need to have this skin color, because then you just confuse people, because I guess not all black people need to have black skin, and then you get into this whole esoteric argument of lineage again, which is just pointless. And that's why it's irreconcilable. And the best way to say this is just those who are poor need help, and we should do certain things to help the most poor, especially disadvantaged individuals. And you're disproportionately going to help people of this skin color anyways in that pursuit. So those are the two arguments. I'm sure there's more. So using it as a better way to rectify past discrimination and to rectify social inequalities. Race is not only less accurate, but more divisive and creates hatred and perpetuates stereotypes. So those are all the arguments, and I think there's really no other way around it. Like, I don't see, the only argument I see against this is that somehow people care so much about race that you cannot let go of it, and I do not think that's true. I think it's very simple to do, and it's something that we can do. And I hope that you all enjoyed this video. It's a work in progress, and like, this is my first version of this argument, and I just kind of wanted to get my thoughts out there, because all that was just off the top of my head. I didn't even read off the paper really, besides for a couple of things. But that's the basic argument that I'm making, and I don't see a way of looking at it any differently. But I hope you guys learned something. I I don't see, like I say, if somebody wants to comment in the comments, and or even on this paper, I'll put it in the description. I want you guys to comment on this if you think there's anything I'm missing, but I just don't see it. I appreciate you guys for listening. I love you all, and hope you have a good rest of your day.